So on Thursday, House Republicans blocked an effort by Democrats to approve $2,000 direct payments. That's, of course, after President Trump demanded that those checks be included in the now signed relief bill. Today in the House, lawmakers are going to vote on a measure to increase checks from $600 to $2,000. But major question marks over whether the Senate, led by Republicans, will ultimately consider that legislation. And interesting divide noted here by journalist Zaid Jilani that Fox News hosts have actually joined in support of the larger checks, even as congressional Republicans so far have chosen loyalty to deficit hawkism over their constituents' needs and the demands of Donald Trump. Journalist Zaid Jilani is, in fact, here to discuss that very interesting dynamic. So great to see you, Zaid.
It's good to be here.
So you point out an interesting divide here, which is that all of the Fox News primetime hosts have gone along with Trump's $2,000 check demands, even as most Republicans have sort of rebuked that effort. What do you make of that divide, and do you think that it can stand?
Look, I think there's a few different things going on here. One, there's an ideological split here. Donald Trump himself was never really a super ideological conservative. I mean, in the past, he was basically a Democrat. He was in the Reform Party. But he kind of went along with the GOP orthodoxy most of his time during the presidency. But I think now that he's on his way out, I don't think he sees adherence to sort of their platitudes and their taboos to be the highest priority, right? I think he wants to do something that will make him remembered on his way out, so he'll have continued influence. And he knows that it's popular to raise the price tag of these stimulus checks. The Business Insider did a poll and found that over 70% of Americans, by the way, it's over 70% of Trump voters as well, think that $600 is too little. So it's the popular thing to do. It's a thing that a lot of Democrats in Congress wanted to do. It's something that at least two GOP senators, Lindsey Graham and Josh Hawley, are supporting. So it certainly is the side of, I think, public opinion. I think the issue is a couple of things. One, the GOP is ideologically opposed to doing this sort of thing. They don't like handing out what they consider to be free money, a government handout to people. And they recognize that if it's popular and people continue to demand it, it'll keep happening, right? So it's kind of a loss for them ideologically. The second thing is that I think they don't want Donald Trump to continue to have as much influence over the party as he does. And if he does get a win on this, he may continue to be one of the more popular Republicans for the foreseeable future, right? And I think they'd prefer to turn the page on him. So these dynamics are kind of squeezing them to where it's Donald Trump plus some Democrats, plus some conservative media personalities, plus a lot of conservative and Republican voters who really do want to see this $2,000 vote go their way, while you have a congressional GOP that I think is very ideologically locked into one mindset. And also, they probably just want to give Trump a loss here. They probably don't want to give Trump something they can hold over their heads for a while. And unfortunately, in that toss-up, that may just be enough to kill these checks, which would be really unfortunate for a lot of Americans who would benefit from having that kind of injection in an economy like this. So,
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you can look at a case like Mitt Romney, who at the beginning of the pandemic was saying very differently. I mean, he was actually one of the leaders out front in talking about direct stimulus. Now that Trump is for it, he's on the conservative talking points again of like, oh, we can't just give out free money. But they don't seem to have any issue with the money going to all kinds of other priorities and industries, just money going directly to individuals. So I feel like that Mitt Romney dynamic may tie into what you're talking about, that they actually want to hand Trump a loss so that he has a little bit less influence over the party going forward.
Yeah, and I think Trump, when he really does stick to his instincts, he often taps into something that he understands there's a visceral need for it here. And I think that for a lot of people, those checks they received from the government, either when it was through the unemployment insurance, the enhanced unemployment insurance in the CARES Act, the stimulus checks, those were some of the most important direct infusions to people's lives that have really happened in recent American history. Poverty actually dropped after the passage of the CARES Act. That's very rare after just a piece of federal legislation to do something like that. And I think people liked it. They want to see more of it. And I think many people in the Republican Party who don't want to see government move in that direction, they view that as a threat. And they also, of course, view Donald Trump as a threat because they don't want to see him continue to have continued influence over their politics, their lives. They don't want to be asked about embarrassing things he says or does. And so that combination of factors is very powerful for them. But on the other hand, on the other side, I think you have a Republican base that has turned on much of the orthodoxy, that is saying that, hey, in this economy where so many of our businesses were shut down by this pandemic, but Amazon was allowed to go on, we are owed something. The government does need to stand in here and help us. Absence of government doesn't always make you more free, right? I think that in this case, the absence of that money is less money you can invest in your business. It's less money that you can use to support your family. It's less money that you can use to be independent again once the pandemic has passed. So I think, there is this ideological clash, and there's also this kind of inter-Republican Party personality clash with Trump. And really, it's on Trump. I think, it was reported weeks ago that Trump privately thought the dollar amount should be higher, but his aides dissuaded him from going to the public with that. I think if he had gone to the public weeks ago and told them, hey, look, I want you, if you're a Republican out there, to call your member of Congress and get them up to $2,000, I think maybe he could have gotten it accomplished. Doing it this way kind of lets them off the hook because they can vote down one bill because it's no longer tied to government spending. It's no longer tied to all these other priorities. So, he hasn't really had them in a great negotiating spot anymore, even though the request is popular. So honestly, it's a little bit on Trump. He's always had a chaotic negotiation style, and that may be what ends up sinking this. But if the vote does happen, I think it'll be very interesting to see how these competing forces come down on these senators.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is if he had tried for this earlier and actually made it a priority and made it a red line that, you're either with me or you're against me on this thing, I agree with you. He could have gotten it. The way that he did it just created a bunch of chaos and uncertainty and, frankly, pain, and isn't ultimately going to wind up likely getting the result. Do you think that the Senate will have a vote? Trump, in his statement that he released along with signing the relief bill, says, oh, yes, they're going to have a vote. Mitch McConnell didn't say anything ultimately about it. And also, how does this tie into the Senate races in Georgia, a state that you know a lot about?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think that Trump certainly is under the impression that they are going to get a vote on this. And and if they wouldn't, then he basically delayed unemployment insurance for people for a whole week without really getting anything for it, which would be a really bad legacy for him as well. So I don't know whether there will be a vote. As you mentioned, McConnell did not mention anything like that, although some other senators like Lindsey Graham apparently think there's going to be one. So who knows, really? With this president, communication is not necessarily his forte. In terms of Georgia, I think this is very important because I think John Ossoff was very intelligent here. He went out in public and attacked Purdue for not supporting the $2,000 and said that, hey, look, I don't agree with Trump on 9 out of 10 things, but Trump is for the $2,000. You're not even for the $2,000. So, Ossoff can read the writing on the wall. He can read the polling. He understands that a lot of Republicans, as well as a lot of swing voters, are actually for the $2,000. And I think that's going to put a real squeeze on David Perdue. And if they don't hold this vote in the Senate, Ossoff and Warnock can credibly go to Georgians and say, look, even their president was for this, but the Republican senators still wouldn't bring it up to a vote. I mean, how greedy or how selfish are they? How heartless are they? Even in this situation, even Trump is for it and they won't do it. So I think it does put them in a political bind. And that is another, hopeful sign that, McConnell will maybe, come to Jesus moment and actually say, hey, look, I need a rescue. I need to bail out these two senators. Let's at least allow a vote on this. So.
I mean, if he actually thought that it would improve their chances in Georgia, I think that's the one incentive that McConnell might actually respond to. Zaid, so great to have your perspective on all of this. Thank you. Coming up, Senator Nina Turner is going to discuss her run for Ohio's 11th congressional district. That when Rising returns.